Alright, so welcome back to Building Better Bereans. I intentionally moved this back so that it would be parallel, and I'm like, I don't got enough room. Alright, so we're diving back into The Chosen. Episode 7, we're taking a look at the last sign. And so we are going to start off on day 1 and work our way through. So, or we're going to jump to day 2. Day 1. Don't do it.
I thought with technology.
Don't do it.
Yay!
Stay. Don't go anywhere. For those of you who watched the episode starts off with this rather lengthy scene, and it's showing Mary hiding away in the hills of France, and Matthew finds him, and then there's this whole scene. And whenever I was watching it, I was like, what in the world is going on? Like, and
the Amazon Prime switch to show on it?
What's going on here? And so this is one of the flash forward scenes that The Chosen sometimes does, and so this is not taking place during the events of the rest of the show. This is flashing forward several years in time. How many, we're not completely sure. But there is tradition that is at work here. So we have both some archaeological evidence and some legend that's at play that gives us what we show on the screen. Mary Magdalene does, it seems, end up in France, and in the show, not in the historical history. Matthew visits Mary, and he tells her that little James has been killed by a spear by King Hyrcanus in Lower Egypt. Now, yes, that was my face whenever I was doing my research, because up to this point, The Chosen has been fairly good with tracking down tradition and making things match up. And while there is evidence that one of the Jameses was killed with a spear, Thomas, one of the disciples, they're not little James. No. And while there are people named Hyrcanus, there's a Hyrcanus I and Hyrcanus II. The Hasmonean rulers, they both ruled prior to the events of Jesus and the disciples and whatnot. So I was like, what? Like, nothing made sense to me about that specific fact, and I was like, that would have been so easy, so easy to not mess up. But I mean, I guess you win some and you lose. You
do. And I did do a lot of research on how the disciples died for last year's Easter musical.
Yep.
And so there are different legends going around, and different disciples have different ways that people think they died.
Yep.
But ultimately, like, they're all out there, and we looked, and I was like, I have no idea.
I don't know where they got this from. Yeah, so
that's okay. But they did name drop a couple people that we do know that are biblical. So one was Paul, which is very cool to have them mention Paul, about Paul sending letters to different churches.
Yep.
And then Nympha, who hosted a church in Colossae from the book of Colossians. So I thought that was cool that they sort of put that in there, because we do believe that the Christians would have formed associations and encouraged one another and contacted one another and sort of supported each other.
Definitely.
So I think that is very plausible.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, Matthew shows his book to Mary.
Which is very exciting.
And he sees Mary's writing something, and then at the end we get to hear the poem.
And you're like, Now, if you liked the poem, blessings, that's great. I'm so happy for you. I did not.
If you liked the poem, it's okay.
If you liked it, that's fine. You don't have, we don't have to go to war about this poem. However, there's a little bit of debate about the whole scene. So, first of all, in my mind, if you are going to have a lengthy overlay in a show that's talking about the Bible, then it should be either the Bible, or more Bible, or perhaps like a Jewish blessing, or some combination thereof. So, that's my personal, that's an opinion. Yes.
And it is possible that Mary Magdalene would have known how to write and write well. Most Jewish girls, remember, did not learn to read. It was not important for them, for the poor Jewish girls especially, to learn to read and write.
Yeah.
So the wealthier ones, especially like Mary, would have supported Jesus, so she probably was wealthy.
Right.
They did often learn to write, but we're just not sure.
Right. There's no record of particularly Mary Magdalene having written anything. Now, there is stuff that's out there, like we have, you may have heard of something like the Gospel of Mary, or something like that. And those are written about her. And there's other extra biblical literature. I went down this whole rabbit hole. I was like, I didn't even realize how much stuff was written about Mary Magdalene. It's essentially, it's not super historical in nature, but it's very complimentary. And I was like, it's basically fan fiction about Mary Magdalene from the early few centuries. And it's like, it's clearly not really rooted in something, but it's just sort of praises her as being a leader. And so what we can gather from this, again, not that it's historical, but that it reveals the kind of things and the kind of perspectives that people had about Mary Magdalene, and that it's complementary. And so, again, she was viewed positively by the Christian community at the time, which is neat.
Yeah. And so while, not that the poem had anything objectionable in it or anything, but we would have preferred, we could have skipped that part.
Could have skipped it. Take it in a different direction. So that's all for our fact checks on day 1. We're sliding into the content of day 2. Now, in the episode, after our cold open scene, Jesus and the disciples are traveling to Bethany for Lazarus's Shiva. Remember, that's the sitting, the mourning period. And in that travel, there's a conversation that happens between little James and Mary Magdalene. And in that conversation, little James cites a section of Psalm 13, and then he basically asks the question, so if Jesus were to heal Lazarus and bring him back from the dead, why doesn't he, or why hasn't he done miracles for the other disciples, both thinking about his own circumstances? Again, in the show, he has a disease that makes him limp, and then obviously we have the backdrop of the whole Thomas and Rama died situation. And so before we think about the question, let's look at the psalm itself. Mom.
Yeah, so we're going to look at Psalm 13, 1-6, which is all of it. And it reads, to the choir master, a psalm of David. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice, because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me.
Thanks, Mom. Now, this psalm, it seems, was probably written during one of the many times that David was being pushed around by his enemies. He's, dip dodging and weaving around in caves. And so this is probably the historical context for this psalm. And David asks, how long? 4 times in the opening 2 verses. Now, I don't know what your experience has been in Christian communities, but I know that I've heard many times over the years something along the lines of, well, I know that I'm not supposed to question God, but anybody else heard that? You're like, oh yeah, like maybe not not necessarily here, but you just sort of heard people say that, I know I'm not supposed to question God, and then I just feel so lost, I feel so abandoned, I feel like it's so dark, I feel like I can't see what God's doing, whatever. But David gives us sort of permission to ask the question here, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? And Mom, do you want to speak into this sort of experience a little bit?
I would love to.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, no problem. So just thinking about this psalm, and many of you know my story, but many of you do not, so I will share a little bit about it. So several years ago, I went through a time where I was really struggling with depression. Now, it turned out to be part of a bigger migraine phenomenon thing, but it started off with neurological symptoms and then quickly decelerated into a serious depression. And so many days I was so sad and just so disheartened. And the days when I wasn't so sad, I was just sad. And I think I put on a really good face at church. But my family and my friends close to me knew that I was really struggling, to the point where I really wanted to kill myself and came pretty close a couple times. And I remember several times just crying out to God and saying, God, why won't you take this away from me? Why am I feeling this terrible? Why can't I get out of this? I'm tired of being in the darkness. How long do I have to do this, Lord? I don't want to do this anymore. And there were a number of songs came to my mind, like Never Alone, Praise You in the Storm, and basically encouragement from friends and family helped me to just remember that even whenever God doesn't answer the way we want him to, he is still there. Mm-hmm. And that we have to trust in God, not the answers that we want God to give.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, especially whenever you had said something along the lines of, like I'm crying out to God. I'm believing so hard in him. But I don't hear anything from him. I don't feel mm-hmm. like he's there. But you said, but I know that he is. I trust that he is. I believe that he is, but the feeling wasn't there.
And that was something that I brought up this morning. Many times when we pray, we're in a dark time and we ask God for help, or we feel someone praying for us, and you just feel that, that lift.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And then sometimes you pray and you're like, okay, I got nothing. Hello.
Yeah.
But so sometimes you just have, and that's why I brought up the Barlow Girl song this morning, and I did not sing it, don't worry, and I'm not going to sing it tonight. But basically, the Never Alone Barlow Girl song does talk where she says, I cried out, but I can't feel you, but I trust that you're still there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's valuable for us to consider then that question. So whenever we do feel that sense of abandonment, whenever we feel lost, when we feel alone, what do we do with those emotions? Do we say, well, I'm not really feeling that, and just pretend like it's not there? Or do we have a God who invites us to come close?
Yeah.
David says in verse 3 of the psalm, consider and answer me, O Lord my God. But the Hebrew is actually a lot more direct. It's more like, me! It's like that. It's a cry. It's very direct. And it's interesting because whenever we were taking a look at this psalm, initially I thought it was just like, this sort of drop in. But as I looked closer, I was like, wow, this actually weaves into the episode really, really well. Yeah. After Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and Thomas, again, struggling with losing Rama, falls to the ground, he demands as well, Rabbi, look me in my eyes. Mm-hmm. And Jesus answers him, and he says, I am, and I always will. And David, in verses 3 through 4, pours out his heart, and similarly, Thomas pours out his heart to Jesus. And again, in the episode, this is, they're sort of portraying for us pastorally how to sort of put the psalm into action.
Yep, and neither Thomas nor David really have their situation resolved in the way that they would like, right? David doesn't get rescued right away. It takes him many years. And Thomas, Rama, is still dead.
Right.
Jesus, though, invites Thomas into the same journey that David has taken.
Right.
Not to understand what's going on, but to trust.
Yeah.
And I love that. When we walk those isolating roads, right, those roads where we feel like we're so alone, God does not abandon us.
Right.
And it's so important for us to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, though, he may allow us to feel
right.
that, I don't feel that.
That hopeful presence.
Yes. And sometimes we have to walk that road. But it doesn't have to be a road that we walk alone or a road that we walk feeling hopeless and defeated.
Right. Amen. Now, at the end of the psalm, David says, I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. But the tense in Hebrew is actually future perfect. It's not that God has dealt, but that he will deal bountifully with me. Not that he's already provided, but that he will. And so again, as Mom said earlier, it's not that David, in the middle of the psalm writing, had an answer to prayer. And he was like, I've now been rescued. While he was still going through the circumstances, he wrote in faith and said, okay, I will continue to keep walking, to keep trusting. And again, as you said, Mom, not trusting in an answer, salvation that's already been delivered, but in the God who walks with him, who hears and who cares.
Yeah. So then we're going to move on to day 3. And last week we mentioned a line from that Thomas gave whenever Jesus says he's going to go back to Jerusalem, right? And the disciples are like, that they just tried to kill you there, right? Do you remember that? And Jesus is like, no, this is the plan. And Thomas is like, well, let's go with him so that we can die with him. And we said we would get back to it. Well, we're back to it. So one of the conversations that occurs in the episode is between John and Thomas. And John sort of says, like, so what was up with that thing that you said about, wanting to die. Like, do you want to die? And in the episode, again, Thomas is like, well, yeah, I mean, sure, why not?
Yeah.
And John uses Deuteronomy 30:19, choose life, to emphasize to Thomas that he should not give up, that he should want to live.
Right.
And live out the best of his abilities of having his mind and heart bound up in the eventual reality of death.
However, while we certainly don't disagree with the sentiments that John is expressing, in fact, we spent quite a long time talking about how, no, this is a good thing. But the context for what's going on in Deuteronomy 13 is that Moses, 30,
Yep.
what did I say?
13.
I was close.
I just wanted to throw it out.
I was
to get
stuck
a
in
correction
Psalm
out there
13.
in case anybody looked.
30.
13.
3-0.
Sorry.
That's okay. In Psalm, crap. Deuteronomy. The thing we're looking at. You know where we are. We're talking about the Mosaic Covenant, and Moses is really trying to sort of set in the people's minds, okay, we talked about this whole thing. Now just to tell you one more time what's going on, my friends, let me just make it crystal clear. You can decide, I'm going to turn away from the Lord, I'm going to do my own path, I'm going to rebel, and if I do that, then I'm going to have all these curses that are going to fall upon us. Or we can choose to follow the Lord. We can choose to obey him, to trust him, and to do whatever he says goes. Okay, great. And if we do that, then blessings will follow. And so then he says, okay, you've got life and death before you, choose life. And so life is the option to follow the Lord. And so it's being used as a metaphor. It's not to literally choose life, although as we did say, so because oftentimes one of the blessings would be a long life, so it would come along with it. So I was like, okay, so in a roundabout sense, okay, so it sort of applies. But the choice that is being talked about in Deuteronomy 30 is to follow the Lord. So that's what's going on there. We don't want to spend too much more time on it, but that's that. So we're going to jump now to John, switch to the New Testament. Whew. All the way over. And we're taking a look at the story, probably very familiar one for most of us, of Jesus calling Lazarus out of the grave. And of course, Martha's famous resurrection and the life. That's, again, one of the very, very, I don't want to say, I feel like it is kind of famous. Like, it's a very well-known phrase about Scripture. So we're gonna, despite it being very, very familiar, we're gonna read it. So, Mom, you are gonna read it. Mom, you're gonna start us off.
That's the Bible. So beginning with John 11, verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Remember that number. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world.
When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and sang to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?
Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done.
Thanks, Mom. As we read through this section and I was replaying this scene in my head, I was just struck once again by how there is something different about seeing something versus just picturing something in your head. Because, and again, not that the way that the Chosen shows it is the way that it happened, but like, have you ever considered that Lazarus coming out of the tomb would have been like super duper creepy? Like, oh my gosh! And you're like, they had like this lady, like as soon as she screams bloody murder, and you're like, well, yeah, well, yeah, because that's terrifying. This guy's been dead for 4 days, and he comes walking out like that's terrifying. So I just want to appreciation for bringing that scene to life a little bit. So in last week's lesson, we did look at the section where Jesus hears about Lazarus' sickness and intentionally says, you know what, we're not leaving. We are going to wait. And he explains very carefully, it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And he says again, Lazarus died, and for your sake, disciples, I am glad I was not there, so that you, disciples, might believe. Disciples don't get it. So we know that Jesus has a plan. However, again, something that I appreciate once again about the show is it sort of breaks that lullaby effect, and it shows in the episode how just confused the disciples are. They're like, what? Wait, what? Why are we not leaving? I thought that he said that this was going to end in death. And like it just sort of brings to life again that these were real people really struggling with what Jesus says. And I mean, sometimes we struggle with what Jesus says too, right? So like, again, it's just very realistic. And then too, whenever he shows up and he's interacting with the sisters and their heartbreak is so real. And it's just, they were expecting something from Jesus and his response wasn't what they were expecting.
I also just want to say that they said on the Bible round table that they said, Lazarus, come forth, so that all the dead people didn't rise up. Because we just said, come forth.
And everybody would have come
That was just a fun fact. And you're like, oh, I wonder. Anyway. So Jesus does arrive on the scene, and Martha, and we think possibly in a moment of redemption here, right? Because Martha leaves. There's all these people at her house, right? And what does she love to do? Host, entertain, keep people...
keep up the societal expectations.
But do the hospitality thing, and she leaves to be with Jesus.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And
that is pretty cool.
Mary doesn't leave yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting.
But then she greets him with the words, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't read tone in Scripture, so we don't know how she said that. It could have just been a plea. It could have been a cry for her heart. It could have been an accusation. Yeah. I don't know. But she does say that. But then I love that she adds, even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Yeah. And again, we don't know. That's where it ends. And we don't know exactly what she was asking for. But I love Chosen's spin on it. And I love to believe that Martha was believing this. They add, whatever it is to give us hope or relief, I know you can. Yeah. So basically, Martha believed in Jesus, but she did not necessarily expect him to bring Lazarus back to life.
Right.
She just wanted him.
Yeah, the context clues very clearly don't point to her being like, I'm expecting you to raise Lazarus. Like that wasn't in her brain as what do we want from Jesus. Yeah. So what is she hoping for? Yeah.
Yes. So she's hoping just for that comfort. So which her line is very plausible.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, we have one of that famous exchange. Jesus tells Martha that Lazarus will rise again. And Martha's like, of course. Someday, there will be a resurrection. And yes, I know that the Lazarus will rise then. And then we have one of the great I am statements. I am the resurrection, and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. Everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Whew, what a promise to put in your back pocket, right? Oh, pull it out on all the rainy days. Now, I don't think that Martha in that moment fully understands at all of what Jesus is saying here. Like I think that she, like, again, as Paul says, we see through a mirror but darkly. Yeah. But Martha does know the one in whom her faith is, and it's in Jesus, and that he is the Messiah, the sent one from God, and she expresses that.
Yes. And then the other sister, upon hearing that Jesus wants to talk with her, Mary, of course, runs out to greet him.
Yep.
And she doesn't start with a question. She falls at his feet, right? But she asks the same exact line. Isn't that cool? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. It's clear that the sisters must have said,
if Jesus had just been here.
If Jesus gets here just in time, he won't die. And then, interesting, though, unlike Martha, Jesus does not engage Mary with a theological discussion, which is just interesting because Mary is the one who is sitting at his feet.
Right.
He says, take me to the tomb. And he says he's very moved, greatly troubled. And then after he sees the tomb, Jesus wept.
Yeah. And again, it's just interesting to see the different reactions to each of them. And it's almost like he's meeting each sister where she is. Like,
oh my gosh, you think he meets us where
we
are?
No,
I
never.
know, it's crazy.
Except, of course, that's exactly how Jesus works. Now, at first glance, if you think about Jesus weeping for Lazarus, so Jesus is God, yes? Yes. And he already said way back there that he has a plan. He knows the sickness, mourning, and death. Yes.
Yes.
And he knows that he's planning to call Lazarus out of the tomb. Yes. Okay. So why is he crying? Like he's like, you're like, okay, come on, man. Like you're about to call him up out of the tomb. You don't need to be sad here. We can just be like, all right, come on, Mary, let's go. So why does Jesus weep? So there's a whole bunch of possible answers to this question. It's interesting that whenever I read this, I always imagined that Jesus was weeping the same kind of weeping as everybody else is doing. And
so did I.
Jewish weeping is the words that are used for Mary and the mourners is a loud, heartfelt, heart-wrenching, very loud weeping. But the word used for Jesus' weeping is just like a quiet weeping. And so you're like, like it's interesting. Again, we don't need to build mountains out of molehills, but it's interesting. So why is he weeping? Maybe out of compassion for Mary and Martha. Again, meeting Martha in that grief. It does say as well that he's deeply troubled in spirit. In the show, he's definitely portrayed as being disappointed by his disciples and by their confusion and their lack of faith, and they're just like, I don't understand. I don't understand. And he's just like, like that shows him the pan around. He's looking at all their faces, and they're like, So a little bit of frustration there. Perhaps he wept for sort of foreshadowing to say, okay, well, I know what's going to come at the end of this. That okay, not only so Lazarus is going to be resurrected, but this is going to be sort of the stone that triggers the avalanche that will lead to the cross. I think that perhaps most compelling for me is that he's weeping not just for Martha and Mary in that moment, but for all of the death caused by all of the sin and all of the grief that would come along with it, and he's just weeping because of what sin has done. And I mean, certainly could be in all of the above. So Jesus is deep.
So we go back just a little bit. Mary told you, remember that number 4. So he's been in the tomb for 4 days.
Yep.
And there was this rabbinic belief that the soul hung around the body for 3 days, hoping to return. And then on day 4, it was like, okay, there's definitely some decay there. Okay, I guess I'm gonna
head out.
No, but I think that was true. How cool that Jesus waited those extra 2 days, right? Because if he would have left, he still would have been too late. But it would have been before the 4 days were over.
There was even, I think, a tradition that people would go to the tomb on day 3.
Yeah.
And they would call out, and they would roll the stone away and call out the name of the person, and it was the ceremonial final step. And there was I didn't hunt this down, but apparently, I mean, you've known people who have like gone into a coma and they've been in the
Yeah.
hot, and they're wheeling them over to get their organs, and then they wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, you're alive. So I mean, maybe they had this once or twice happen in the first century too, and so day 3 is when they were lads, you there? And then would sort of roll it back. But so they'd already done that. If they were doing it at this time, that had already happened. So day 4, it stank.
Yep.
Correct. It did stink, and the soul was departed. Whatever traditions were going on, the soul was gone, not hanging around. So Jesus shows up. He goes, roll away the stone.
He does. Yes, and Martha's like, what? And so he tells her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And that seems to connect really well with Jesus being the resurrection and the life.
Yeah.
But also,
it also connects to it's because whenever you're like, well, did he tell Martha that they would see the glory of God? Not exactly, but who did he say would see the glory of God? He said to the disciples, hey, this is for the glory of God. And so it's impossible for me to disconnect these things, although he is very clearly talking to Martha. I don't know, one of the Bible's great mysteries that I will probably forget whenever I get to heaven, but that I want to remember whenever I get to heaven and be like, so in John chapter 11, and it's going to be like, I'll answer this question. So so it's probably again connecting back to the idea of, so why did Jesus allow all of these things to happen? And even in the prayer, Jesus says, hey, this is why Lazarus was allowed not just to get sick, but to die. So this miracle, as the episode is titled, the last sign, would be the final establishment of Jesus' identity as that Messiah, the one who could work the miracles that nobody else could. If you're like, wait, the miracles that nobody else could, if you're interested, just read the chapter. If you haven't read the chapter in the book,
Yeah,
this is the
really
one
cool.
this sidebar that I can't go down because it'll take way too long. But anyway, not only does it establish Jesus' identity, but as the Messiah, but as God, the only one who has the power over life and death. And of course, it does, as we talked about earlier, set that final ball into motion. The religious leader's going to be like, I'm sorry, he did what? He did what now? And then it'll trigger them to pursue his final demise.
Yep, and just a side note that we don't have in here, I'm sorry. The episode is really interesting that it's to see how the rabbis who are against Jesus sort of handled the news that Lazarus was alive, right? Because you think, how could you dispute that? Like, really, like, how could they be like, and they were like, oh, it's a plot because Lazarus wasn't really dead, he was hiding out.
Yeah.
And then the one guy, Yusuf, was like, but a doctor signed off on the thingy, and like, he was paid off, and it just was fascinating to me because I do think sometimes, how could they have seen all these signs and not got it? But if you don't want to see,
then you don't want to see. Yeah.
So day 5.
Day 5.
So, and I do appreciate that the Chosen did this little post-resurrection conversation between Lazarus and Jesus.
It's fascinating.
Because the Bible doesn't give us one, but you figure he wouldn't be like, okay, you're alive now, see ya. See you next, well, maybe not, but we'll see you sometime. Yeah. So for this little conversation, Jesus shares some of his heart with Lazarus. Yeah. And interestingly, Lazarus quotes from Isaiah 53.
Yep.
As if it were obvious, even before Jesus died on the cross.
Yeah. That this was about Jesus. And so the question is, was it really? And of course, many from a Jewish background. So it's Isaiah 53. If you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, this has Jesus written all over it. Front, back, left, center. How could you, as a Jew, read this and not see the allusions to Jesus? But let's think about the original context in which Isaiah was written. So it was written by the prophet Isaiah. Hence Isaiah. So in 722 BC, Assyria conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. So this is when the kingdom was split. We had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And Isaiah was warning the southern kingdom of Judah and saying, hey, get your act together. Stop following all of these false gods. Stop abusing your people. Stop it. Otherwise, a similar judgment's going to come to you as well. Now, Isaiah chapters 40 through 66 addresses the period where, the people didn't listen and they did go into exile. And so now they're in exile. And so he's writing to them during this period after, again, Judah fell to Babylon in 586. And so if you're thinking about, okay, how did everybody interpreted this before Jesus came about. They were like, hey, this is talking about the nation of Israel, God's servant who suffers on behalf of the rest of the nations. There are 4 servant songs that are in Isaiah chapters 42, 49, 50, and then 53. And then those other ones, it is like the connections are clear that it's talking about Israel. And so then whenever we get to Isaiah 53, you're like, okay, well, if we're just sort of applying the similar hermeneutic principle, it does make sense that it could be referring to the nation of Israel. So let's think about this. So what was Israel's purpose originally? They were intended to be that conduit of blessing. Remember Genesis 3, Abraham receives that, say, hey, through you all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. They're going to be a kingdom of priests. That's from Exodus 19. Now, for those of you who know your biblical history, did Israel succeed at this calling? No, they didn't. I mean, they failed repeatedly throughout history, and that's one of the reasons why they ended up going into exile. And so, as we think about the words of this nation who has failed, and they are in exile right now because they failed in this mission, this chapter would have brought them that sense of renewed hope, and you're like, okay, this is who we are suffering, but we're suffering with a purpose. I'm sorry, I just read your entire
That's okay. It's okay. I was just pausing to see if you're.
Nope.
So we know that Israel never succeeded in their mission, right?
Yep.
The expected Messiah was the one who would fulfill the nation's original mandate. He became the conduit of blessing and the mediator between God and man.
Yep. Now, we're not going to read Isaiah starting in chapter 52 because it does seem to thematically go along with it, and then Isaiah 53. But if you didn't yet, we would encourage you to do so.
For one thing, it's going to be in this year's Easter musical.
So you should definitely read it. But also, because, so yes, although, again, originally, probably in context, thinking about the nation of Israel, but of course, can you read it without seeing Jesus? Please say no. Please say no. And so it is good for the soul to read through it and to reflect on who Jesus is, who he was, what he came to do, his identity, his mission, and what his life, death, and resurrection has accomplished, not just for the world, but for each one of us individually as well. And so we encourage you to reflect on that passage as you go through your week. And so that's it for episode 7. We have 1 episode left, so if you're like, wait, where are we? The last one. Last lesson in the book, that's where we're at. So thanks everybody for hanging with us. Have a great night, and we will see you next week. Sign up for everything over there. Bye.